I'm just sharing my screen and going to the beginning of the first webinar in a series of webinars being planned on the topic multilingual domain names. Must congratulate the APIRALO Policy Forum for the initiative for this webinar series. Specifically, I must acknowledge Ms. Justin Chu for initiating this webinar series and the wonderful support from APIRALO Policy Forum all these years. Mr. Satish Babu for making me focus on the topic with APIRALO Policy Forum and Consolidated Policy Working Group. Dr. Maureen Hilliard for enabling the granularity of work as APIRALO. In the alphabetical order, ICANN and UNESCO joined together 2025, reaffirmed their partnership to promote linguistic diversity and digital inclusion. Here is an excerpt from the press release for the ICANN 85 that's scheduled to happen in Bombay, Mumbai from 7th to 12th of March, bringing close to the few weeks before. Prep week has just begun. And the excerpt from the press release is titled Strengthening the Single Interoperable Internet for All, issued from headquarters New Delhi, India, by 5th February 2026. The key topics mentioned in this press release for ICANN 85, the new GTLD program, ICANN community's role in advancing a multilingual internet, and the multi-stakeholder model speaks for everything. The nice press release with the key topics. The internationalized domain names, the IDN movement first started in a big way in 1998, starting from the National University of Singapore in March 1998. By the second half of 1998 is the formation of Asia Pacific test bed in various countries in Asia. Special congratulations for APIRALO and the APIRALO Policy Forum for initiating this series of webinars. In October 2013, the first new generic top-level domains GTLDs were introduced. The first 4 new GTLDs were IDNs. That is how we have progressed from 1998, very properly done, tested, verified. Enabling the secure and stable use of IDNs is crucial to growing a multilingual internet and digital inclusivity. As stated in ICANN's mission, the organization works, adopt, or implement policies or procedures that take into account the use of domain names as natural language identifiers. Pitinen Koo, who is the speaker of the day, is an excerpt from a report titled Supporting a Multilingual Internet Through IDNs, ICANN IDN Progress Report dated 14th January 2022. With this, I must thank Pitinen Koo for readily accepting our invitation, being with us, and over to you, Pitinen. We are eagerly looking forward to your webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal, and it's my pleasure being here in this webinar. For today's agenda, we have about 25 minutes. This is the first one in the series of IDNs and UA, and it's very glad to talk about IDN, especially in the APAC regions where we actually have a very diverse city of the languages and scripts. For today, go through maybe 4 main elements. First, to introduce about IDNs in general. And then moving forward, we will have a little hands-on activities to go through how to build the rules for the IDNs, which we call label generation rules. So we go through all these different pieces behind the scene. And then we also wanted to point out how the community can support or drive this initiative. And lastly, how to get involved. So in any point in time, if you would like to ask question, I would highly encourage to do. There's quite a number of slides, but I'm pretty sure we can cover it into time. So please feel free to raise your hand or put question in the chat. I'll try to keep on talking on it. All right, so let's get started. The internationalized domain names. So this is just go to the very basic on the structure of domain names. Usually we have second level domains are top level. And this is from left to right script. So the most right is the top level domains. So the display can be in two forms. On the top, we call it view labels because it stands for Unicode labels. This is basically what the human would see and read in their own script. And then once it's go into the while when it's going into the lower layers to transmit in the DNS system, is transformed into this XN dash format, or what we call the A labels or ASCII labels. Is a equivalent labels, and all these conversions and the protocols definition can be done because of a set of the standard defined in the RFC. So we have this standard called the IDNs for applications, or IDNA, and this is the current version is the 2008 versions. IDNA is developed by the Internet Engineering Task Force, or IETF, a technical body outside of ICANN. And with the IDNA 2008, there are a set of RFCs, which is enable all these IDNs. We have the standard track from RFC 5819 to 93, and also informational tracks as well. In the a set of standards from is ranging from the definitions and document frameworks, how to use this standard set, is going to also what are the protocols to register IDNs, to look up IDNs, and is also mentioned about how to identify which code point, which Unicode point can be used in the standard. And for this one is also cover how to handle the right to left scripts more properly. But all this, the key point is all the IDNs must be compliant with the IDNA 2008. Just zoom into one of the standard RFC 5892. This one is about the code point that can be used in the IDNA. Each code point in the Unicode standard, it actually have categories associated to it. And that's it is a value of property. There are 4 types of property values. You have the ones called pre-valid or protocol valid, which is essentially the one that can be used in the IDNs. For example, here, E with accent. Behind the scene, the Unicode point is 00E9, and that is marked as the pre-valid. The second type is the one that require the contextual rules, and this is only able to use if they are satisfied in some specific context. For example, this code point 00B7 is the red dot here. This is the major dot, which is used in Catalan language or some part of area in Spain. And this is normally it will just come in between 2L or 006C only. So it's not allowed anywhere else because it can be kind of get confusing between the normal dot, which is not in the middle. We're supposed to separate the second level and top level. So to this code point to be able to use, it must satisfy this context. It has to come in between these 2L only. Then there is another type where it's just basically disallow. And this one is, for example, the mathematical signs or all these exclamation marks and question marks and so on. Because essentially the IDNA is for domain names, which should be the mnemonic system as a name and identifier. The marks may be not suitable to use in the identifiers. And it can get confused with the protocol syntax as well. And then lastly, the unassigned. This one is basically the code point where it's not being assigned to any clips or characters. And this is because in Unicode, they allocate a certain block of codes to be used for some certain scripts. Some of the scripts may have 100 code points and it may be used 100 space out of it. Some script may have just very small, maybe 50, and the rest is empty. It's just allocate for that. So those block, which is not used, is actually unassigned. So by the RFC 5892, only the p-valid ones can be considered to use, and also the ones that meet the contextual rules. But also it's important to note that if it's p-valid alone, it doesn't automatically imply that this can be used in DNS already. So as stated here, even though it's p-valid, it doesn't imply that it can be used. And it's further mentioned in the other RFCs that because of the diversity of the characters for the U labels, so the variants, the definitions, and also the rules beyond whatever state in the RFC are mandatory. and it has to be also incorporated as well. And this is the background and why we actually need the label generation rules to certify this additional variant and rule definitions before we can use any language or script in the domain name securely. Let me move forward and starting into behind the curtain when we talk about LGR or label generation rules, how it has been done. So they are comprised of four main parts. The metadata, which is basically the description or information about this LGR. And then the other three parts will be the normative part, which is encoding. So the code point repertoire, the variant part, and then lastly the rules. And we go through this each one together. Before that, the design principles of the LGR, which are obviously applicable to all the parts. We refer to the RFC 6912, which is the principle of how to include the code points to use in the labels. These are the principles that we need to consider and it's supposed to be satisfied. First of all, longevity, because Unicode is actually updating regularly and they keep adding new code points. So sometimes if the code point is fairly new, like recently added in the last one or two versions, maybe all the other system haven't really knows how to handle this code point properly yet. Maybe the fonts is not updated enough to catch up. We suggest that the code pointer to be used has to be encoded in the Unicode for sometimes multiple versions before. Also, the least astonishment principle is we have to take into account of the population who use the code point. It shouldn't be something that if it included in and then people who knows the script actually feel surprised, why is it there and don't know how to use it or don't know how to understand how to use it properly. Also, it has to be contextual safety, and this is similar to what we saw earlier. Some code points can be in only in some certain context to make sure it's not create any security issues. Moving on, the conservatism principle, and this is overarching. So the code point, when it's included, it has to be as conservative as possible as practicable. Because imagine when we have only the ASCII domain names long time ago, we already have a possibility of confusion between letter L, letter I, or number 1. So the more code points to be used actually is also create a more risk for confusabilities. So whatever is in, it should be conservative. And that's also hand in hand with the inclusion principles, which mean when you start to look at what are the code points to be used, the idea is you should start from the empty set and then gradually assign the Unicode code point for that script one by one and really answer whether this code point is needed to use, is secure to use, and then you include it in. It's not the other way around that you start from default, everything can be used and then you reduct whatever have problematic. So it has to be come from the empty set to gradually increase. That's the inclusion principle. Also, the next one, simplicity, when you define the rules. Basically, we are not aim to encode everything to the spelling idea. This is the mnemonics. It can be something non-meaningful, and the rule has to be simple enough. So then when people use this rule, they are fairly have a clear idea and can understand. And all this readability principle also needs to be held, and it's also hand in hand with least astonishment. Whatever rule that allows the label to form or disallow the labels to not being formed, it should be something not surprise to the user. And then lastly, stability. The LGR is not a static document. We try to make it as static as possible so it's maintain the stability, but however, it can be adjusted. But it has to be adjusted in the way that is going from the more conservative to less conservative. Because if you permit any code point to use already, it's very hard to disallow it later on because somebody might already register that into the system. So it has to be conservative. And this is the main idea of a principle to decide the LGR in all the parts. So then in this session, we would like to try on a small exercise. Hopefully it excites you. So we'll try to build an LGR, and this is a mock-up language. We just call it A to G language LGR. So this language have these following characteristics. First, the language just contains 11 Latin script letter and 1 sign. So 12 elements in total. And these are the 11 Latin scripts: A with accent, B, C, D, E with accent, F with a hook, which is a different code point from the normal F, letter G, and then this vertical line with 2 lines. This is a click collectors. I just call it click collector. And then it's also include one sign, which is a degree sign. This is the 12 element that used in this language, this mockup language. Also, the two form of F and F with the hook, they are considered as the same by the language community. For example, if the word fin already there, another word using the F with the hook, in, if both of them are registered, this can create some security issue because people get confused. And then lastly, for this example purpose, the click characters cannot be at the beginning of the labels, just given that this is the rule of the language. So we will go step by step and trying to build out of this example. So first piece, metadata. This is the information about LGR. Basically, it's these elements that needs to be added to this section. For example, version number, date of this LGR, language. This one specifically have another RFC govern it. It's called the language tag RFC 5646. And this one, the valid subtag is registered on the IANA subtag registry as well. For example, if you are building for French, then the value in this element is FR. Obviously, our A to G language is not in the standard. We don't really have a value to use here. And we actually not focusing in this metadata part in this webinar. But another point to mention is in the description element, you can actually add in quite a lot of text explaining the design of the LGR is coming after. And you can also add it in the HTML syntax. So once it's rendered into HTML in the human readable version, you can also have some things to do there in the formatting. Then let's move on to the more essential part, which is the code point repertoire. So the goal of designing the code points, just as mentioned earlier, the domain name is the mechanism to help us remember IP addresses. So we're trying to build a mnemonic system, and it has to be secure in use, because if the users of this can create any confusing to the user, this motivation of using the names securely to in the domain name is not met. Also, it's good to remind that this is not planned to completely cover language or script requirements. So it may not be a proper word. For example, it can be abbreviations like ICNN, right? And also, it's not meant to be a correct spelling. For example, in English, it might be the norms that the Q must be followed by U or generally followed by U. But basically, this is not the case. We are not aiming for correct spelling. And also, it do not need to carry the meaningful words because it can be names, right? The domain names can be either a word in dictionary, or it can be a name of person, name of a place, name of whatever. The objective is we would like to build the name, but not really cover all the linguistic requirements. In the repertoire part, actually, so in the ASCII domain names, we already have some rules around it on the repertoire. By the standard, if it's the top level domains, you cannot have anything else but letters, because by the protocol, this is also the system not get confused with IP addresses, right? So on the top level, you cannot have digits. And so by the RFC 1123 is allow only the letters for the top level domains. But if you are at the third or second level, you can also use digits and hyphen. Okay? So these already have some governing rules on what are the repertoire or usable code points in the ASCII domains. In the ASCII chart, basically ASCII is something we normally see on the keyboard for English keyboard. So it's also include something not character like space or also mathematical signs and so on. And they have numbers and characters. So only a subset of this can be used for the top level domains, which is only the letters. If it's second level, then the digits and hyphen can also be used. So in some way, in ASCII domains, it's not everything, but it's something that has to be shortlisted as a subset to be used in DNS. Now, when we have the Unicode standard, the Unicode actually encoded all these clips from different scripts into the code points. The code point is the four hexadecimal here, and sometimes it's also 4 to 5. And this is so many code charts. On the left is example from Arabic. From the right is the Ethiopic script, for example. Imagine we starting from just the ASCII possibility, one script. The total is 127 code byte. Only 63 of them can be allowed. And with that is already can have some possibility of confusions between them. Now, when we expand the scope to cover Unicode, the current version, the version 17, is already encoded 172 scripts, and the code point is nearly 300,000 characters. So it is imposed too many risks if we enable everything. So the question for the communities who built this LGR is then how many code points that should be allowed. And to build a repertoire, so 2 steps. First step is to review the Unicode chart that you are working on. And then before including any code points in, all this question needs to be asked. So starting from, is this code point p-valid? And then even though it's p-valid, is it used? Is it need to use in the scope that you are working on? If it's used, maybe is it used in an identifier? Maybe it's used in somewhere else and it's not really suitable for being the names. Also, the code point, is it encoded in the stable ways already? Is there any rendering issues to this one? The next question would be, would this contain how to access this code point? For example, some newer code point may not even available on the general keyboard to type. And then lastly, just to go back to the IFC 6912, which is the principle for us, is there any conflicting with that, any of the principles when we include a code point? If we go back to our language, A to G language, the first requirement is this language have 12 elements and 11 of them are Latin characters and then one sign. So each of these code point will needs to be examined and answer those questions earlier, and finally determine whether it should be included or not. So this is the relevant code chart for those code points. Actually, it's comprised with 3 charts. The basic Latin, which is have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The Latin 1 supplement chart, which have A with accent, E with accent, and also the degree sign. And then the other chart is Latin extended B, which is have the click characters. So all this one by one needs to be examined and then answer on this question. I'm not going through each one, but just to point out that when we go through this for 00B0, the sign degree, this one actually have the property disallowed in the IDNA 2008. So this cannot be included in the LGR. And now after examining this, we look at this and then shortlist that, okay, only all this, sorry for the sheet, can be included. And the red one, 00B0, must be excluded. And this is the first part. So we also have the tool. I'll share a little bit on how this look like later. But basically, when we complete the repertoire part, we have the list of code points and the clips and the names. And obviously, 00B0 cannot be in this repertoire. This is the code point part. And we can also test by the tool how the effect of it. If we have, because it's A to G language, we have A, B, and also E with accent. If we test whether this label is valid as per this LGR, it will say, okay, this is okay. All the code points are in the repertoire. If we try to test another label with A with umlaut or the 2 dots above and BE, we didn't include this one in the repertoire. So the tool will say this is invalid because 00E4 or the A umlaut is not in this repertoire. Let's move on to the second technical part of LGR, which is the variants. There are so the question on the variant, is there any code points considered the same by the language or script community? And first, let's understand the variant. Variant is, as mentioned, is something considered same by the script or users community, and it can be motivated into 2 areas. First, by the security motivation, For example, if you see the EPIC here on the left and another word which is look like EPIC on the right, behind the scene there are two different code points altogether. The one on the left is from Latin script and one on the right is from Cyrillic script. If both of them are in the system, it actually can create like total confusions. By the human eyes, you cannot see the difference of these two. So in this case, the variant needs to be defined for the security purpose, which means if one version of it is already in the DNS, the other version shouldn't be exist. And this has been done by the Latin script community. Cyrillic script communities work together and identified as, okay, 0065 and 0435 should be defined as cross-script variant, and it should be block each other. Then we also have another type of the motivation of variant, which is for the usability. And this one is especially for the Chinese and the Han scripts and also the Arabic script. So for Chinese, these two words, the second characters difference in code point and also in clips. But because of the Chinese, they have two versions, the simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese. And it can be kind of interpreted as the same by the Chinese community. The simplified Chinese is used in China mainland and the traditional Chinese used in somewhere else. So if you are a business owner from China mainland and you want your brand to also be usable for other places as well globally, you might want to have the two versions of it active at the same time. This is another type of variant disposition. We call it allocatable. So then the two versions can exist at the same time, but it should be managed by the same entity. So we can reduce the security issues. And this is go the same for Arabic because the Arabic scripts used in many places in the different Arabic-based languages around the world. So over time, some of the characters may have some other variations, but it can be the same to the script users. So this also needs to be identified as well as a variant. The goal to define variants is to we make the mnemonic system that we built in the same way, in the same time, we want to minimize the user confusions. So the definition of code point or code point sequence that can causing the labels to become the same within the script and cross scripts has to be defined. And because of the conservatism principles, mainly we would want to define is to be blocked, but in the minimum case, it may need to be used simultaneously, and those are allocatable variant, but those has to be minimized. And just to note, successfully defined variant is not trivial at all. It's maybe because you may have to look across the script and work across the community working group to finalize this. So the question to ask when defining variants is following. Would a reasonable people, a person with a native knowledge of the script, consider a pair of code point interchangeable? And we aiming this for the users must have a fairly good knowledge about the scripts, because imagine if I don't know Chinese to the good extent, everything that have too many lines together or too many stroke in Chinese characters may look quite confusing to me. But that's not the idea. The variant is at the level that even the native user of that script also find it confusing. Also, would this a person unable to determine which one to another, or it can be used interchangeable in appearance or in the other alternative representations? Also, should there be any variant of code point that is being there in some certain context? And we're not going to the detail in these examples, but some of the variants should be defined in the variant in some certain context only. And then going back to the conservatism principle in 6912, is there any conflict with the principles in that standard? And lastly, we also need to look across the script in the variant analysis. So in our examples, we know that for this language requirements, the F and F with the hook are considered same. And if one version of the word with one of them in, another version also in, is also perhaps can create security issues and user confusions. So to define this variant, obviously we define two of them. The F is 0066, F with the hook is 0192. And because of only one version should be there, so this is defined for the security motivation, the type of them should be blocked. And that doesn't mean that only one version can be used. It's actually both of them can be used. But if one version of it already exists, the other one shouldn't be able to register. And for example, this test label 3 face with a bit accent. So if this is the primary label and we crunch it by the tool, it will first validate the labels. Okay, this label is valid, but this label also have a variant label, which is the F with the hook. And you see the first code point now changed to 0192. And this position is blocked, which means if the face with the normal F is already exists, the F with the hook shouldn't exist. But in the same way, if it's starting from F with the hook first, like this test level 4, the word fee, F with the hook. So this one can still be used and is valid. Oops, sorry. Go back. Yes. And it will generate the normal F, AWE, as a block variant. So this is the variant concept. When you define variant as block, it's not blocking each other at the code point level, it's blocked at the label level. And then the last part, the rules. So are there any restrictions that require to ensure that the language or script is used in the secure and stable manner? So the goal here is to reducing the possible label space. So then the ones that is unclear or can cause security issue can be limited. And those include the way to use the script in the way that is not licensed, which is not mean the spelling rules, but sometimes there are some characteristic of the script that is not expected by the font rendering or by the system, and this can cause security issue. We have some example coming up. Also, we also have to create the rules to reduce security issues. Also, is there any rules that actually limit the usability constraint? So the rule has to be quite balanced between the usability and security. In the label, in the variant definition, sometimes rule is used to limit the number of allocatable variant as well. And then lastly, sometimes when some code point may happen in a certain sequence only, those cases can consider using a sequence of code point instead of rules as well, which means there are some exact patterns of this, how to use this code point, and you don't have to encode it into the rules. So this is some example of how the rules can do the risk mitigations. This example is from Thai scripts. So we have these characters which look like a double, like 2 lines. Code point is 0E41. This is a vowel, E. And then we have another vowel which is 0E40, just the single vertical line with a head. But obviously if we type these two characters together 2 times, it looks very much like the one on the left. So in this case, if we're not restricting anything, then these two can cause the homoglyphs confusions. So in the Thai LGR, we have to put the rules that the 0E40 cannot follow another 0E40. So this risk is mitigated. Another type, when we say how to mitigate the risk from the rendering, this is example from Lao scripts. Laos have some other concept of tone mark. So you can have consonants and then you have a tone mark to adjust the word, the sound, the level of sound of the consonants, like ma, like that. Normally one consonant will expect only one tone mark because you cannot identify how to sing 2 notes at once. This example, 0EAE is a consonant, and then EC9 is a tone mark, and EC9, another one is a tone mark. The dotted circles here is not part of the character glyphs. It's actually a placeholder, meaning that actually to use the C9, you have to have something to put it here to render properly. So if you try to type the tone mark twice, which is not licensed by the scripts, what could happen is it can be rendered inconsistently across the system. For example, if this is the Chrome browser on the Android phone, the tone marks, it will just rendering on top of each other. If you type 3 times, it just go higher and higher because how the system render is, okay, the tone mark has to go on top of the previous one. While you paste the same text into browsers in iOS, like iPhone, it will try to look for a consonant before, but when it couldn't find it, it's just put the dotted line here and put the tone mark next to it. So these two already inconsistent rendering. And actually another type which is most secure, but I couldn't find a good example in time is actually render on the exact same place. So that means if you type 2 tone marks, 3 tone marks, or 1 tone marks, it will look all the same. And that will be also the type of the homoglyphs attack. For this, actually more than 1 tone mark on the consonant is not expected at all. And it can cause the rendering issue across the system. The fonts may be not handling properly. So the Lao script LGR include the rules to restrict that it has to have only 1 tone mark on a consonant. So this is the type of rules that has been encoded in the existing LGR. So come back to our exercise. If we say the click characters here must not be at the beginning of the labels, then we have to apply such rule into this code point 01C2. And when we test, if these click characters come at the end, it will say this is okay, valid. But if we try to put it in the front, then it will say, okay, this code point actually failed the rules that is supposed to be satisfied. So in a way, we can reduce the risk by applying these rules. Then next, all this when we discuss, all this is actually can be encoded into the XML. When we work with the communities, the input that we need is actually not needs to be in the programming skills or anything. We just need those bullets, right? We just need all this, okay, what are the rules? What are the variants? What are the code points? And then to be able to use it in the system, we encode it in the XML format. The uses of the LGRs, we make it in the LGR format because it's machine readable. And so when it's machine readable, we can have the tool to crunch this rule and then use the rules to either validate or generate the variant of the labels. For example, in the RuleZone LGR, we have multiple scripts in the RuleZone LGR. And then if we use the tool to crunch the LGR, when we add the input of apply for string, we can say whether this is a valid string or not. And if it's a valid, what are the allocatable variant and block variant out of it. The RFC that explain how to encode this is the RFC 7940, which is encoding all these 4 elements into the XML. The XML will look like something on the left, quite intimidating, but basically it also can be converted into the HTML format. And I can publish the LGR in both formats. So the main one that's going to be used by the system will be in the XML, but we also publish the equivalent version in HTML as well. So the human can read. And with this, we also provide a tool which can help the LGR building and also can convert between XML and HTML. And the tool information is available here. This lgr2.icann.org is the tool itself. The user guides and everything is available on the webpage here. And also, if you would like to really use the source code of the LGR tool integrated into your system, we also publish this code on the GitHub. We open source it, so you can also use all this to integrate to your system. Going back to our exercise, if we have all these 3 requirements for the A to G language LGR, the output of it will be something like this. The XML is on the left. You can see the 4 parts from metadata. So this is the output of our exercise. On the left is the XML versions. So we can see the 4 elements of it, the metadata talking about versions. The code point is encoded in character elements, and these are the code point A, B, C, and so on. We also have the variant definition is defined in this way. So the 0066 is the F, and then 0192 is the F with the hook. So both of them are defined as variant block. And if we jump down to the code point 0192, is also say it's a block with 0066, which is the F. And we also have the rules, which is applied to the click characters 01C2. These characters will be satisfied only when it's not when at the start of the word. Later in the XML, we also have the definition of how these rules are working. All these details, you can find how to encode each rules in the IFC 2940. The equivalent HTML of this thing on the left will be something on the right here, metadata on the top, and then the list of repertoire. And in the list of repertoire is also have the link to the variant set that related to that one. So this one you see the F and F with the hook linked to set one together. And if you jump down later in the HTML, the set one will display that these two are variant with the block type. And if the code point have the context rules associated to it, it will say, okay, this one is only okay when it's not when at the start of the word. And then we have the definition part of the start of the word. That's the end behind the curtains of how this been encoded. And you can try the tool to see if you can follow this. We also have another separate detailed step-by-step tutorial to use the tool, which may not fit in the time, but we plan to share this with the secretariat later. And you can try this example at your own pace. Then the next section is the need of community-driven development of these rules. So we actually have two main projects on this. One is the rules on LGR, which is the rule for the top level. And the second one is the reference LGR, which is the rule for the second level. So for the top level or the rules on LGR, we obviously, as you say, there's so many considerations to come up with the rules that balance between usability and security. So no one can work on it alone. I can actually just a facilitators who work with the script community as per the LGR procedure and work with each script community we call generation panels. So we work with each generation panels to develop the rules. And then because of the rules on LGR will be used for the top level domains, we have another panels called integration panels to make sure that all the script level LGR are integrated seamlessly. The cross script variants are defined properly in all the relevant scripts and so on, and eventually become the single collection of rules on LGR. So currently we at LGR version 6, which already include 27 scripts, and this is supposed to support almost 400 languages. This is a collective work for over 11 years. We have 18 generation panels from 45 countries. And with this, we involve 270 plus script community members who volunteers owning this work, and is over 10,000 hours of volunteer hours. This is the list of the script that are available in rules on LGR 6. You can take a look. And this also be the base of the LGR that's going to be used for validating the strings for the next round, the 2026 round as well. Then the second projects we have, the reference LGR. This one is for the second levels. As you see earlier, there's slightly differ in the rules where the second level can also use the digits and hyphen. And it's not only the ASCII digits, because some of the scripts also have the local digits as well, like Devanagari digits, Bengali digits. And so we actually built the reference LGR based on the available rules on LGR, also consulting with the script communities and publish them for public comments and then finalize. So the use of reference LGR is when the TLDs want to offer any language or scripts, they actually have to develop the rules, how they're going to offer that language or scripts. And that rules is called IDN tables earlier, because in the past, all these rules are just the list of the table of code points. So in this context, the IDN tables and LGRs can be used quite interchangeably. If they're gonna offer any language in the script, they have to publish IDN tables, and before that, they have to submit the IDN table to ICANN to review for any security issues. So this reference LGR is used as a baseline to review those IDN tables. We publish this so then it provide consistency, transparency on how we're gonna review this. And this is also aligned with the request from our SG. Also in the CCTLDs area, if the IDN CCTLDs, during the IDN CCTLD fast track process, if the CCTLD's managers or requester have to submit the IDN table that they plan to offer also during this process. So reference LGR can be used for those requesters to develop their own IDN table as well. Currently, we publish 60 languages and script reference LGR listed here. You can take a look, and also hopefully if you see this material also, you can take a look at your own time, and if there is anything missing, something needs to be added, we're more welcome to work with you to develop the new one. When we do the developing of the reference LGR, there's a collaboration effort between community and ICANN. So we, from the community side, the voluntary expertise looking for is the linguistic expertise to develop the proposal, which is cover the repertoire part, the variant part, and also the rules. We also would need a word list or the corpus, so then we can test the rules and do further analysis. And then once we have the LGR ready, we will test the LGR, provide the test result, and then the script expert volunteer working group will be expected to help us review. The support that can be provided by ICANN is we will basically take the proposal in the form of just the bullet point writings from the working group and turn it into the FC 7940 format. So you don't have to worry too much about knowing how to build the XML. And then we work together back and forth to review this LGR. Once it's finalized from the working group, ICANN will also take it through the public comment process as well before we finalize. So this is the mode of collaborations when we work in this project. And then the last part, how to get involved. So if you like to develop reference LGR for your language or script is still missing, please contact us at idnprogram@iccann.org. And for other information on IDNs, please visit iccann.org/IDN. All right, that's my last slide. Thank you so much for your attention. And now I hand it over back to Justine and see I'm open for any Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Pritinan. As announced earlier, this is a webinar series on multilingual domain names. We are not really looking at the entirety of multilingual domain names in this particular webinar one. As the agenda has been announced, we are looking at only the ICANN's goal for a multilingual internet, IDNs, some specific topics, guided exercises, which Pritinan has taken us through in a very lucid manner. So, right at the outset, one quick question, Pritinan, as I surmise from the chat, a distinction between GTLDs and CCTLDs specific to IDNs at a basic level may please be spoken out by you.
Yeah, thank you. So the difference between GTLD and CCTLD in general is GTLD is open in rounds. As you may know, the 2026 round is coming up. But for the CCTLDs, actually there is another process which is not needs to happen in rounds. Currently for the IDN CCTLDs, we have the IDN CCTLD fast track process, which is the process where you can request for the IDN CCTLD strings. They have certain requirements to meet. For example, you have to support the supporting document from the relevant government. The string has to be confirmed that this is a meaningful representation of the countries and so on. And those can be evaluated in the rolling basis. So that is the main difference. It's not in rounds. But for other aspects, I would say the GNSO and CCNSO was requested by the board to try to align the policy for both as much as possible. And generally, so far, there is no discrepancy between the two. Yeah. So I think the main difference that I can see is just the nature of applying in rounds and be able to request in the on rolling basis.
And a very quick question, direct question to you from Justine. How do we count That's a nice question from one of your slides. We can go back and please enlighten us on how do we count the scripts. For say 27 scripts are there. It is 27 scripts in RZLGR V6.
This number is slightly hard to count because there's a joint between Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. So if you see here, Chinese, there are Han script, just one. And then for Japanese, there are three scripts together, Hiragana, Katakana, and Kanji, which is essentially Hans. And then the Korean have two scripts, Hangul and Hanja, which is Hanja is also the Han. So the three of them, the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, actually brings us up to 4 scripts. Han, Hiragana, Katakana, and Hangul. Yes. Sorry, we just, to make it technically correct, is maybe a little bit hard to count. Thank you.
That's good. That's nice. Well, next question is on the emojis. It was a good discussion that was running on chat with Dr. Sarmad Hussain, chipping in with some nice pointers and links. Your comment on what are all these emojis and should they be permitted?
Yeah, so emoji is not IDMA 2008 P-valid, so that is not allowed. And just to give some details of it, because emoji actually have also quite a variations, like smiley face, you can also have the skin tone of the smiley face. And actually the same cry and smiles may render in some ways in one phone, but another way is another computers. And is also, I think in the past I saw if you type, for example, you have a man and a child, it can sum up and become like a family emojis. So it's a lot of playful elements there, which is good for a chat in messaging, but it's not stable enough to use as an identifier or in the name. For those, this is not allowed in IDNA 2008.
Thank you. That's nice. And I have a question from Okina. It's a good question. In terms of space consumption in bytes and character space, how can we put into consideration the discrepancies in character space consumption when typing texts in text-based communication platforms? Say, for instance, when typing regular, you're online, can you join? Can you please switch on your mic and ask the question, Kenechku? It's a good question, very nice question.
All right. Thank you very much for the delivery. My question is this. Sometimes, for instance, typical example is when you're typing text messages on a mobile phone, because you know that from time to time, people will share links, domain names and links over text message. Okay, now, if you're typing, for instance, English alphabets, once you type E, one space is reduced. Once you type another space, one space is reduced. But once you type an alphabet with diacritics, for instance, local alphabets, once you type them, a 100-character space will be gulped up. So if you're supposed to type a single message for just within 160 characters, the moment you include a single alphabet with diacritics, which is not an English alphabet, 100-character spaces will be used up. So that means it is a way of, perhaps I see it as a way that something that might discourage the use of indigenous languages and characters. I don't know if anybody has witnessed this thing one way or the other.
May I surmise saying that is this exercise optimized for communicating the domain names through messages, or is it only for the domain name and its way of functioning?
Yes,
Yeah.
for instance. Okay, are you referring to me?
The Petinan would probably take charge of commenting on this
Okay.
because
Alright.
there's nice symbols. Android is mentioned, it drives the point. Thanks. Yes, please.
Yeah, let me try to answer. If it's not right to the point, please feel free to follow up. So I think I understand what you mean. For example, normally if it's the English per se, type one character, it will consume one space, right? But for complex scripts, for example, Thais and Laos here, we do have the vowels that can go above and below. So it's normally in the past, if you say the SMS can take 100 characters, 160 characters. If you type only English, it will just go to 160. But if you type Thai or loud, one position is normally will just reserve 3 characters because you might have something above or below. And so your space is reduced to about 50 plus characters. That's some phenomenon that we can see, but it's not really directly on the domain name itself. Of course, it might discourage to use or to type the non-English word in any text messages because you can type little less characters. But that is not directly relevant on the domain name itself. But it's a good point. And also, I just like to segue that in the last webinar of this series, we will talk about universal acceptance, which is something the idea is to make sure that the domain names, the valid domain names in any language or script or in any length should be treated equally, should be usable equally. Obviously, using in the text messages may not be the primary concern at the moment, but we can continue working together, discuss on this, and see whatever we can do. And I would encourage you to join the whole series of webinars, which we will talk about universal acceptance as well. Thank you.
That's nice. Then there is the question of reconvening the community participation. How frequently have we been witnessing community participation in the LGRs? And what is the statistics associated with that? Have they revised at some point?
Sure. For this one, we are actually haven't get to the point that we have a regular statistic yet, but we have been working with the communities in the ongoing basis upon request. Currently, we have 2 main communities. One is from Indonesia, which they develop Meet scripts and Javanese scripts, and also looking into Pekon script, which is like the update version of add something to the Arabic scripts. So even though we're working with the single communities, there are multiple scripts that is ongoing. Another community we are working with at the moment is the UCAS, Unified Canadian Syllabic, Canadian Aboriginal Syllabic, UCAS, UCAS. So these are the community in Canada. And originally we're starting from Inuktitut language, which is the language used in the eastern parts of northern Canada. And we already done that. Right now, the community move on and working on other languages. And just to give an example, they actually have various languages and at some point come up into 12 languages. But then to develop 12 languages, maybe it's take up a lot of resource from the community and also the ones who will review and integrate this reference LGR. So right now they are consolidate these multiple languages into one big script level LGR. So they are now working on UCAS script LGR, and that's another one which is ongoing. Moving forward, we're actually trying to make it more regular, but right now we are still working with the committee on the requesting basis. So if you feel like something is missing or even updating, if you review the current one and you feel like, for example, in Latin scripts, it's used in multiple languages. The generation panels already try to cover as much as possible. They cover about 270 languages in their proposal. But obviously, it may not cover whatever languages which is still not included. So if you find something or some particular character that is needed to be added, please reach out to us. We can definitely work with you to see if there is update needed to the existing one.
The question of emojis straight away comes back because it's the first webinar we are having. Dr. Aftab Siddiqui, you're online. You had a nice context to share here. The difference between CCTLDs and GTLD registry agreements. May I request you to let us know a bit more of that context? Dr. Sarmad Hussain is here. Dr. Aftab Siddiqui was mentioning that CCLDs can do this, GTLD registry agreements need some compliance with IDNA 2008. Petinan has made it very clear that it's not in compliance with it. How do they become compliant? How do they become compliant? Is there a way? Is there a process definition where some usage of emojis has happened, and how do we bring them to compliance? Petinan.
Thank you. So normally I can implement based on the procedure and standard. For this, if any changes needed to be done for the IDNA 2008, it will have to start at the IETF level. So that will be the channels working with the IETF to see if there is any ways to adjust to the current IDNA 2008. But in general, I would my opinion is would not be a secure way to enable the emojis. But however, if any change needed to the standard, it has to be worked up with the IETF.
What I was speaking tags on to what Satish Babu has indicated. Some registries permit. Siddiq has also indicated. Nice response. We will probably keep it as a pointer for the subsequent series. Dr. Sarmad has been very categorical and he has sent a nice link. So, how do we make them compliant? That's a simple question that we'll have to look into. And another 3 minutes to go. Any specific questions? Dr. Cheryl, you were mentioning about the 2012 GTLD round. Anything specific you want to share with us? Satish Babu, your hand is up, please.
Yeah, thanks. Well, just to make a very quick point about the difference between CCTLD and GTLD, it turns out that every GTLD has a contract with ICANN that is mandatory, and that contract specifies things like compliance with IDN 2008 and so on. CCTLDs are not bound by any such contract. They are country-based. They may be reporting to the government of each country. They are not bound by any such ICANN contract. Some of them are compliant by choice, very few numbers. But by and large, the majority are not bothered about such a compliance. They can do pretty much what they want to do, irrespective of or going against the advice of the SAC in ICANN. They can choose, maybe because of market condition. Maybe the Gen Z wants emojis in their DNS. So some countries, especially very small countries, island states and so on, they have permitted this. And that is pretty much against ICANN recommendations. But since they are what they are, they don't report to ICANN. They can do whatever they want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petinan, Dr. Sarmat, Dr. Satish Babu, and Justine for being with this seminar and participating. And it's a good start for a webinar series on a very important topic. Next few days, Bombay is having this as a key topic, and wishing all success. Thank you.
Thank you very much.